This is the night show, ladies and gentlemen. Mischke here with you on a glorious evening here in the upper Midwest. If you haven't been outside tonight, find an excuse to take a walk. Feel free to ditch the radio. Your health, mental and physical, is more important than my career. In fact, health is the topic this hour. What do you people think of when you think about pharmaceutical companies? Thousands of images race through my brain just saying that. All sorts of thoughts and ideas and stereotypes and emotions go through my mind when I think about pharmaceutical companies. A local gentleman, by the name of Dr. Carl Elliott has written a book called White Coat, Black Hat, Adventures on the Dark Side of Medicine. Carl Elliott is a professor at the Center for Bioethics at the University of Minnesota. And besides writing this book, he's written several others, as well as writing in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Slate. I'm having him on because I'm fascinated by this topic, although I will say, having read the book, all I was left with at the end was, well, rage.
There's medication for that.
Yeah, there is. Welcome, sir. Happy to have you on board. I'm glad you came down. I don't often have guests who are interested in making the trek to big-time Minneapolis to be on at this hour, so I appreciate you coming down. I want to start out by giving people a little sense of your background, because prior to the start of the show, I was inquiring about your days in medical school and the fact that you did, in fact, proceed through medical school with the idea of becoming an MD, only to end up escaping to the world of philosophy. Can you explain that trajectory to people?
I'm not sure anybody can explain that. Well, I come from a family of doctors. I'm from South Carolina. My father was a family doctor. My brother and my father and I all went to the same medical school in South Carolina. But with me, it didn't really take. I just couldn't stand it, basically. And so...
but you did it.
I did it, yeah. I wasn't going to give up. But I kept looking for something else that would be better than medicine. And I'd done some philosophy when I was in college and thought, I could do this. And so that's what I did. When I finished medical school, I went and did a PhD in philosophy.
Well, help me out. So you're going through medical school and you hate it. Why not leave?
Good question. Stubbornness, I guess. Partly I just didn't want to give up. I wanted to show that I could do it. And
what does doing it mean? Because you're the only guy I know. There may be millions of you, for all I know. The only guy I know who invests that time and energy without afterwards. Or is it fair to say you are doing something with that? For you to be a professor of bioethics, would you have had to have gone through med school?
No. There's probably more people who haven't than have.
Okay, so when you get out of med school, well, let me ask. You said, what did your brother do when he got out of med school?
He actually hated it even worse than I did.
What the hell's wrong with you people?
That's a good question. He became a psychiatrist.
All right, and this is something that a lot of people sometimes confuse, but all psychiatrists are MDs,
right,
as opposed to psychologists. You might find a psychologist who went on to get a PhD or not, but all psychiatrists are MDs, and that's not unusual for him to follow that. But in your particular case, there was some other part of your brain that wanted to be exercised. Philosophy is a really different art. It's less exact. It's less mathematical. It's less scientific. So. Did you sense that there was sort of two parts of you kind of competing there?
No, There weren't two parts. There was only one part. It was just that I made the wrong choice. And I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, and to be honest, I don't think I even knew there was such a thing as philosophy. I'm not even sure I had ever met a professor of anything before I went to college.
Well, everyone I know who majored in philosophy who's not teaching is painting houses.
Or carrying bags at the airport. That's another.
So this wonderful combination of... So then what did you get? What did you get in philosophy? How far did you go in that?
A PhD.
Well, then you did go and get that.
Yeah.
And so you've been writing, I asked you before the start of the show, all your books, you're writing in the Atlantic, in the New Yorker, most recently an article in Mother Jones having to do with our own dear U of M med school. All of it is medicine related. So philosophy and medicine is your field. The ethics, the philosophies that surround the practice of medicine.
That's true, although this last book is less philosophy than a kind of investigation, I would say.
It is an investigation, but it raises ethical question after ethical question after ethical question. I mean, it's start to finish, just very, very worrisome. I want to... Again, the book is White Coat, Black Hat, Adventures on the Dark Side of Medicine. Let me just start out saying, what is the dark side of medicine? The pharmaceutical company's relationship with doctors and medical schools? Is that the dark side? What's the dark side?
That's part of it, but I would say it's larger. It's the influence of money on medicine and the transformation of medicine into more or less a business.
How big is the pharmaceutical industry?
Really big.
See if I have this right from memory. Third biggest industry on the planet?
Well, it's for most of the 90s, it was the most profitable industry in the world. I'm not sure that means it's largest, but the profit margins were the biggest.
Okay.
And now I think it's dropped off slightly to around third, but still one of the largest.
Just astonishing amounts of money. Just it's staggering to read about how much money we're talking about in this industry. I have so many different directions I could go here. One direction is, and this is obviously going to be your personal opinion on this, do we need all the pharmaceuticals we have in this world?
Do we need them?
In other words, is there an astonishing amount of waste in this department, all in the interest of making a lot of money? Are the medicines made all necessary?
Well, what the industry found in the 1990s is that there's a lot more money in manufacturing drugs for mild chronic conditions that affect a lot of people, and for which they'll need to be medicated over the course of their life, than for acute, serious illnesses.
Okay.
And so that the aim became to manufacture blockbuster drugs. A blockbuster is usually defined as a drug that makes over $1 billion a year. And so this was the era of, for example, the antidepressants, Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, all of which became enormously popular. Drugs for things like allergies, anxiety, diet drugs, anything that you could sell to a lot of people for a long period of time. Part of the difficulty there is that, a lot of these drugs are essentially clones of previous drugs. They're not a huge. There's not a huge amount of difference, for example, between Prozac, Paxil, and Zoloft. They're all antidepressants. They're all made to treat depression, and chemically they're not that different from one another. But what the industry found is that the market is virtually limitless if you can expand the notion of depression to cover more and more people. Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, you could say the same thing about any number of other illnesses. And even taking a portion of that market can be enormously lucrative.
What do we do when I ask a question like, are there too many drugs? What do we do with a cover story in Newsweek a year ago, little less than a year ago, that comes out front page saying antidepressants don't work? And you think about these billions and billions and billions of dollars. Now, what the science ended up saying was they do, in fact, work for severe cases. If it's a mild case of depression, they're less effective. Moderate, less effective. But severe, they tend to provide some sort of scaffolding as you address other things associated with it. Now, there are people who counter that, and it's an argument that rages, but it does make me wonder, when there is so much money to be made, who's looking out? Whose job is it to look out for the patient? Not the pharmaceutical companies. You can't argue, or can you, that they care. I mean, if they care, it's sort of a side story. What they're in the business to do is make money, not take care of people. Doctors are supposed to be taking care of people, right?
Right. Well, a lot of doctors, I think, are fooled because what we've seen from litigation against the pharmaceutical industry over the past decade is case after case where a drug looked very good if you read the medical literature. If you were reading the journal articles, the drug looked very good. The clinical trials said it worked. The side effects were minimal. It became enormously popular. Doctors wrote scripts like crazy. And then you have some kind of questions about the safety of the drug. There's litigation, possibly litigation over fraud or illegal marketing. And documents are unsealed as a result of the litigation. And it turns out that the company has been spinning or manipulating or hiding data, which, if you were an ordinary reader of the medical literature, you wouldn't actually realize. It's only after the litigation that the manipulation and the spin becomes apparent.
This is the pharmaceutical company hiding the data.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, but here's what I don't understand. Why do we have a system where the pharmaceutical company gets access to data that other people don't have?
That's a good question, and a lot of people are asking the same question. Why do the drug companies get to test their own drugs?
Exactly.
The FDA has this data, but ordinary practicing doctors don't have the data.
That's right there. We have, and there are many problems to get to here, but there is a clear problem that you have to take care of that somewhere along the line. There's too much money in this to assume that these guys are going to be on the up and up, that they're not going to, after all this investment in these drugs, hide unfavorable data. Who's supposed to be overseeing this? The government?
The FDA
is supposed to be. The FDA has access to all this.
FDA has access to all the data, but the data is regarded as proprietary, so the public can't get access unless there's litigation.
So we're not being served by the government either. The FDA is also failing us. At least in the case of the pharmaceutical companies, we understand why, just plain old greed. Why is the FDA failing us?
Well, the FDA sees its job as determining whether or not a drug is safe and effective. And if it's safe and effective, they approve it.